This video is documenting the prediction that the San Francisco 49ers will win this year's Super Bowl that will be played in San Francisco on February 8th, 2026. The date that this video is posted on the social media platform you are watching it on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Welcome. In this video, I'm going to be explaining the true prophetic meaning, the purpose for the shooting by ICE in Minnesota on January 7th, 2026. In doing so, this truth will be proven to be true through these two predictions that the ICE shooting points to, which is that the San Francisco 49ers will win this year's Super Bowl in San Francisco, and this video is being made prior to the beginning of the playoffs. That said, it has been known for over a year, even before last year's Super Bowl, that San Francisco will win the Super Bowl in 2026. But again, it is before the beginning of the playoffs. The betting odds in Las Vegas for the 49ers to win this year's Super Bowl is currently 28-1. Those are not good odds. Furthermore, the 49ers will have to play the entire postseason on the road until the Super Bowl, because the Super Bowl will be in San Francisco, their home stadium. And that'll be part of the story, actually. How the San Francisco 49ers had a long road trip route to the Super Bowl in order to play the Super Bowl and then play the Super Bowl in their home stadium. Guaranteed that will be part of the news story, the media story regarding this year's Super Bowl. And the reason for that is to highlight the fact that they are playing in their home stadium. The significance of that is that it'll be the third time in history that the team winning the Super Bowl, the winner of the Super Bowl, will have won the Super Bowl in their home stadium. And it is Super Bowl 60. So the third time in history in Super Bowl 60 hints at 3 sixes. 666. Also, the 49ers will become the third team in history to win 6 Super Bowls. That's another 3 sixes. It'll be their third Super Bowl played in 6 years. Another 3 sixes. And the last Super Bowl they played in was in the 36th state. The first one, God uses firsts, that is a hint at 666 because 36 hints at 3 sixes. But it is also 6 times 6 and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangular number is the last number in the 36th row, is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 up to 36 equals 666. And so, anyway, back to what I'm saying in this video, this is one of the predictions that are being made, and the purpose of this prediction, that the 49ers will win this year's Super Bowl, is to prove what I am saying in this video is true. Believe me, I know far better than anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove, without a doubt, case closed, no debate at all, zero debate, the controversial things that I'll be explaining in this video. In other words, the purpose of this prediction that is from God is to prove the controversial things that I'll be saying in this video are in fact truth. Okay? That's the purpose of the prediction. Now, the other prediction that these signs I'll be explaining will be clearly pointing to is the death of Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom in a plane crash on August 2nd, 2028 in St. Louis. But that's another subject that's a few years ahead of time. This video will be posted now, and we can learn in August of 2028 that this prediction is being documented as far back as right now. And again, this video will be hopefully gone viral with the prediction for the 49ers, but we'll see, because the skeptics will not believe that. We all know that 28-1 odds is still enough room for a skeptic. But if you watch the other video that I've made and this video, it'll be clear that skepticism regarding this prediction being from God will be 100% irrational. There is absolutely no room for rational thought in this skepticism once you've heard the reasons for the prediction, including the ones that I've just listed, by the way. Actually, that's enough. I've already listed enough reasons to know that the 49ers will win the Super Bowl and that their win will be from God. There is no way a human imagination, a human being, can concoct in their mind the reasons that I just gave. No one is that creative, all right? To be clear, all of what I've just explained, and that's just scratching the surface. That's not even the signs that I'll be talking about in this video. But all of what I have explained regarding how I know the 49ers will win the Super Bowl is clearly from God. And if you don't think so, you, my friend, are a fool. But it isn't human nature to be rational. Human beings aren't rational creatures. God designed it that way also. And so, go ahead. Dismiss it if you like. You know the consequences. You've heard it before. You know where you are going if this is true. And so I advise you to take seriously what I am saying, at least reconsider your agnostic atheism, the fundamentalist religion that you belong to, which is in which the core belief, like every other religion has a core belief, is that there is no evidence for God, yet the evidence for God is overwhelming, including 20th century science. But of course, you don't know that because of the brainwashing and the culture we are in. Okay, and that's essentially because the agnostic atheist does not want there to be a God. It's icky for them. They do not like the idea of having to pray to a God every morning and to be thinking about God or being accountable to a God for whatever, that sort of thing. And so, you can tell yourself rational reasoning for why there's no evidence for God, but it's a lie. It's not only a lie, but it's an absurd lie. It's so outlandish. It's so ridiculous. The evidence is overwhelming. And so, but like every religion, it has a core belief, and that's the core belief of agnostic atheism, which is a religion. It's a dogmatic religion, that there is no evidence for God. And and what I mean by that too is it requires faith. Far more faith, the way that the agnostic atheist understands the term faith, far more blind faith than it requires to believe in a God. In fact, believing in a God requires no blind faith. It's actually just reality. It's just the facts. It's just evidence, But you ignore that at your own peril, including this evidence in this video, which is this prediction. And again, the prediction will be proven to be true with the things that I'll be saying, right? The reasons for how I know cannot be invented in a human mind. You will see that. I'm about to share with you some truly astounding information, mind-boggling information. Stay tuned. And it's going to get more interesting as we go. It's just going to build. That's the nature of this information. Things will build on themselves, and it'll reach a climax, and it'll be a wow. Don't skip ahead because you'll miss the point. You have to have it build. You have to understand the background of the information. And so let's get into it. Now, as we can see here, this email was composed on January 9th. Okay? This is before the playoffs begin on January 11th. All right. And also the date that this video was posted proves the prediction is being made ahead of time. The post date of the video you were watching on whatever social media platform you were watching it on. And no, I don't know anyone at YouTube in order for them to fix the date, if that were even possible. But besides that, I've posted it on multiple, or will post it on multiple channels, different platforms. And so, all right. But anyway, if you are skeptical, I'll forward this email to you, and you can see the post date, the timestamp on this Google email here, okay? Now, what we are talking about in this video occurred on January 7th, and it's the report of this woman who was shot while she was obstructing ICE. Depending on which team you're on and which side of the media you get your media from, you will have a different understanding regarding what happened. And the media of the left is the lying version, and the media on the right isn't the lying version. And I mean that literally. More than literally. And I will prove that as we go with the signs themselves. This is a warning to you. Okay? It is time for those on the left to think a second time about what they are doing and the media that they consume and the people they listen to and the politicians they listen to, which is wicked and evil. Okay? Now that said, God did design it for there to be some controversy, otherwise it wouldn't be a major story. But the version of the controversy is the lie, okay, and everything surrounding it, etc. But that's a long story, and it'll take a long time for that person who is in that camp to rewire their brain, because they've wired their brain and their worldview, and it's the way God designed it, and it's extremely difficult to unwire and figure out where they're wrong. Because this is all spiritual, it's because way back at some point in their life, they began choosing the wrong road, and it builds successive wrong decisions. Successive decisions to choose to believe the lie because they like the lie just builds, and it's just caught to the point for many people where they're beyond the point of return. They're going to go to hell, but that's a result of a lifetime of choosing to believe in lies. And they're so into the lies now that they can't see straight anymore. And so Satan is having his way with them like little children, little naive children that don't know, like babies. They're being manipulated by the left media through Satan. Okay? So the woman was obstructing ICE all day, probably something you didn't hear in the left media, for example. And this is an interesting thing in itself, okay? Because in Bible prophecy, we have a description of a woman. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let's just get to building this story here. So this, and just be patient as I build the story, okay? I'm just going to give you random things, but it'll all build, you'll see. So January 7th was 3 months or 92 days or 13 weeks and 1 day. This is my friend writing me this. This is the more interesting one here. This 13 weeks and 1 day after the closing stock market number, which was on October 7th. And that day, which was prophetic, and we knew it at the time, the stock market, the S&P, closed at 6,754. And it occurred to me to subtract that number. I forget why, but there were reasons why. It wasn't just random that I thought to do that. Anyway, subtracting this number from that date, October 7th, gave us the death date of Kurt Vonnegut, one of the most famous American authors in history. Okay, Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote the novel Cat's Cradle, in which there is a substance. The plot is centered on the substance that is named in this science fiction novel, Ice-9. Okay? And people in the plot is the Ice-9 is ingested. Anyway, So ice 9 is this thing that God has pointed to, and we have concluded that this is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, or rather, I should say, it's symbolism because the ice itself is something that's consumed. People consume ice in their drinks, for example. And the mark of the Antichrist is something that is ingested, or rather consumed, or rather put into one's body. Yes, it is the thing. Ice 9 even rhymes with it. It's the VACCINE. The begins with a vax and ends with a in. Okay? Ice 9. Now, what confirms this too is that the shooting was in Minnesota. Minnesota is the 32nd state. 13 weeks and 1 day hints at G131, which is the word in the Greek concordance for blood disease, which is what a person gets once they have taken the thing. Okay? And what is the thing? It is the SHOT. It is the shot. And that's why shootings, including mass shootings, this isn't a mass shooting, but mass shootings and this shooting in God's signs are symbolism for the shots. The things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolic of the things that come out of things and go into people. That's why this occurred in the 32nd state. And that's because also the 32nd prime number is 131. So we have this 13 weeks and 1 day connection, and the 32nd prime number is 131 to hint at G131, which confirms the connection to the sign that pointed to Kurt Vonnegut and Ice 9. And of course, this is an ice shooting in the 32nd state. The woman reportedly shot is a white liberal woman named Renee Nicole Good. If you could call her a liberal, we would also prefer to call her a radical leftist. But then again, the word liberal today doesn't really mean the classical liberal, because the true liberals today are conservatives. Okay? And so this woman, the radical leftist, crazy Karen woman, Renee Nicole Good, okay, who was obstructing the ICE vehicle with her vehicle on the road to obstruct U.S. national law enforcement on the road. And I do mean to laugh at that, because it is tragic, but it is silly. And it is characteristic of a woman that's just, that has no man in her life, basically. This is the big underlying problem of society in Western culture today, is the independence of women. Because it is related to the original sin, which is independence from God. And so that's what happens to women that have become brainwashed with ungodly ideology, a replacement with true, reality about God, with another ideology, another religion, which is for the left, politics and worship of the state. And that's her, right? So she's gone mad. But she's an extreme example of it, an extreme case of it, because that's what happens to some of these liberal women, these leftist women, is they just, without a man in their life to ground them, they get really, really crazy. And think that they can do stuff like that without getting into danger. You don't have the right to, behave like you did with the ICE agents on the road there, doing their job, enforcing the U.S. law. I mean, you might disagree with the law, but you do not have the right to do that, you crazy woman. In other words, she got what she deserved. It's silly, it's tragic, because she's so stupid. She didn't know what she was going to get what she deserved. But anyway, okay. So the name Renee means reborn or born again. And this Renee Good is equal to 88 in Simple English Gematria. And I'll explain why this is relevant as we go. But the name Pope Francis died at the age of 88. Okay? Also, the name Trump is equal to 88 in simple English gematria. And of course, this is all about Trump derangement syndrome, right? Because of course there were ICE in the Obama days, and the people that are angry about ICE right now were angry from the very beginning, long before they did anything different than what ICE did during Obama years, right? It's just Trump derangement syndrome. It's a sickness. It's an illness of the mind. And it's spiritual, though, because Trump is God's trumpet, trumpeting his signs, and they are having a spiritual reaction to it, although they don't recognize it. They don't know what they're doing. In other words, they have the spirit of Antichrist. Who is Pope Francis? Okay, so Renee Good is a good example of someone who has the spirit of Antichrist. And what she was doing on that day before she got shot was spirit of Antichrist. She's in rebellion against authority, and she hates Trump because, well, he's a man. Unlike prior leaders and the other leaders of nations these days, he's very masculine and he's a white man, and they hate that. That's just one thing, though. And so, So Pope Francis, okay, so now Renee Good sounds like renegade. Renee Good, renegade. This is very important because the Secret Service gave Obama the nickname renegade. And Obama is the second of the two antichrists. Now, Renee Nicole Good hints at reborn, okay, born again, Nicolaitan, and righteous, or God. Good, righteous, God, okay? This is what this means. Now, what God is saying here is that, so the primary purpose of the end time signs here is warning specifically for the church. Because the whole reason for creation is the church. Everything about and this is the thing that leftists hate, but that's why they're in rebellion against God. Man is the center of God's creation. God desired to create a creature that he could have a relationship with. And earth is the center of the universe, and man is the center of God's creation. But the church, those who will be with God forever, is the purpose of the creation. This creation will not last forever. It's a temporary environment for God to play out his purpose, which is to create an opportunity for a creature to choose him or not choose him and reject him, right? And so, anyway, so God's purpose is the church, but God today is extremely disappointed with the church, specifically the American Evangelical Church, which is the Nicolaitan Church. It is the Church of Laodicea, for example. Of the 7 churches, which represent the 7 stages of church history, the last church, the Church of Laodicea, is the church of the modern evangelical church. And it is the church of Nicolaitans. And they have the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. And Jesus said in Bible prophecy, the book of Revelation, he wrote a letter through John, that he hates the Nicolaitans and their doctrine and their works that are a result of their doctrine. He hates the Nicolaitans. And he hates the Nicolaitan doctrine. And he is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth, as he said, on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Now, what is this doctrine? And how come we don't know what it is? Well, that's because the church is led by Nicolaitans who suppress this information that it is the Nicolaitan doctrine that they preach. What does the word Nicolaitan mean? It's a Greek cognate that means ruling over the laity. Okay? The Nicolaitans of today, the pastors, preachers, priests, not preachers, priests, bishops, reverends, popes, etc., they'll tell you that, well, this Nicolaitan thing in the book of Revelation, we don't really know what he was talking about. So let's just move on, basically, is what they'll say. It's just these bad Christians that were disappointing Jesus. That's what they'll say. But that makes absolutely no sense, because the book of Revelation is primarily for our current time. It is for the end times and the end times people, which is now and us, this time now. And so Jesus also mentions this Nicolaitan twice in the book of Revelation. Do you really think that it was meant to be obscure what he was intending to convey, communicating? Do you really think that Jesus would do that? Does that make sense to you? Of course it doesn't. So why don't we know? Well, again, it's because it's related to how Jesus forbid calling anyone your teacher, which is another word for pastor or priest. And Jesus also forbid preaching for money. And these Nicolaitans will claim that they have the authority to preach for money and make a living off of preaching for money through twisting a few verses of Paul out of context. And reading them out of context, in other words, the preceding and following verses after, and also twisting the meaning of what's being said. If read properly, it's quite clear that, if anything, Paul was talking about preaching for food, rather receiving food for what they were doing. But Paul was not talking about what these preachers do. The form of evangelism that Paul was referring to is not what these preachers do today. And these pastors are no different really than priests. It's all been inherited from the Catholic tradition. Not much changed in the form of church assembly after the Protestant Reformation. They still line up in rows and listen to an alpha male of the group step on a stage and speak for 45 minutes and get paid for it. That's still the case, right? And for example, Paul also said, if someone has something to say when someone else is speaking, let that person who is speaking be silent and let the other person speak. But if you were to do that today in a church, well, you would be immediately escorted out of the church and asked never to return again. And that's because these so-called pastors have a 100% monopoly on information, because they are socialist dictators, cutting off the body of Christ, for one thing. But they really are truly dictators and socialists, no different than a socialist dictatorship will restrict the flow of information in a society or a nation. And we don't approve of that, so why would we approve that inside a church? People have the right to decide for themselves what's true and what's not, and furthermore, they do not have the authority to say what's true and what isn't. That's why John said, you see, for you know, you do not need a teacher. You have the Holy Spirit. And we now have the canon. We have the Bible. We do not need teachers, pastors. And just like in a socialist dictatorship and in communism, when people are dependent on the state, they become infantile. They become immature citizens. Well, that's the same when a preacher spoon feeds their congregants and they're not responsible for their own learning. That's when they are assuaged to believe that they are okay by just showing up once a week and just taking what the preacher says because that's how it's done. But no, that's not what's supposed to be done. You're supposed to learn and take responsibility for your learning, and you don't get that from your so-called pastor. Okay, so I'm going on a little bit about this Nicolaitan thing in this video right now because, well, it's an important concept here because of the name Renee Nicole Good. Because God isn't only saying born again and righteous, he's also pointing to the Nicolaitan church, which is the modern evangelical church. And what is the Nicolaitan doctrine? It is free grace, or cheap grace, or once saved, always saved, which comes in the package of dispensationalism. And free grace has a cousin, sovereign grace, which comes in the package of Calvinism, Reformed theology. The Reformation was a revivification of Augustinianism, because Luther was an Augustinian monk, a member of the Augustinians, the sect, and Calvin titled his writings Systematic Augustinianism and only quoted Augustine, none of the other early church fathers, which contradict Augustine, not just occasionally, but constantly. And also Calvin disparaged the other church fathers, I should say, that came long before Augustine in the 4th century. The other church fathers that in the 1st and 2nd centuries either knew one of the apostles or personally or knew someone that did, and also spoke the original Greek. And when we get into the writings, we can see of the early church fathers and not Augustine, we can see that Calvinism is ridiculous and not true, and Reformed theology, right? But it is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. And this is, for example, why we have the Nicolaitan church of our day, because Calvinism has experienced waxing and waning in popularity over the centuries. And currently, we are at a peak in popularity for Reformed theology and Calvinism, which is convenient given the timing of the end times. And so, now everything that I've just said is 100% true. I mean, this is the purpose of this prediction that is from God, as I explained at the beginning. It is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. To not appreciate this is to not appreciate this prediction that is from God and this video and video channel. You are wasting your time. You might as well turn off the video now. Again, the purpose of this prediction is not for you to go, oh, cool, neat. You knew that this was going to happen ahead of time. No, that's not the purpose of the prediction. The purpose of the prediction that is from God is to prove the controversial things that I'm saying. And this is because these controversial things that I am saying, all of them, have been overwhelmingly proven to be the case through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which will be proven to be true and is only being explained on this channel. It'll be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, the most important video on this channel for you is the 23 church signs video, which I need to update soon, but it's the 23 church signs video. Now that we've gotten this concept out of the way here, let's see what God is really communicating to the love that he reproves the Laodicea church. God reproves whom he loves. But make no mistake, there is a reproving going on, and there's a sifting of true and untrue Christians, the wheat from the tares, and they are inside the evangelical church. Or rather, I should put it like this. As a result of what's going to unfold, many will be brought out of Nicolaitanism, if you will. Their faith will be refined and tested, and they will have actualized their faith, if you will. See, there are two parts to salvation. Abraham was deemed righteous for believing in God's promise, yes. But there's a second part in the 22nd chapter, no less. God called Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. And as he was about to do so, God sent the angel and told Abraham, "Stop, don't harm the boy, for now I know that you fear me." First of all, predestination is not true. God didn't know ahead of time. He says it's clear. God didn't know whether or not Abraham feared him or not. And God is seeking those who fear him. That is the theme of the Bible. Those Nicolaitans that say, no, that's Old Testament stuff, we don't need to fear God. Or those that say the definition of fear is to like worship or be reverent. No, it literally means fear. It's what it means. When you fear God, it's a gift from God. It's not a negative, it's a beautiful thing. And God is looking for those who fear him, not just believe in him. Because as James said, so you believe in God, good for you. Even the demons believe. He was saying that sarcastically. So what? So who cares if you believe? The question is, do you fear God? Because as James said, faith without works is dead. And he gave the example of Abraham. As well as Rahab, who believed and feared God so much that they were willing to trust him and demonstrate their faith. You see, one's faith is not actualized until they demonstrate their faith or they live out their faith. Christianity is a doing, not an intellectual assent to the correct doctrine, like the Calvinists believe. That's why the Calvinists squirm in their seats when they hear this stuff, because it threatens their salvation in their mind, because they believe they are saved through intellectually agreeing with the correct doctrine. It's absurd. And these thousands of different sects, different denominations, that each by definition have a way of contradicting the teachings of Jesus, by the way. But to actually believe that one is saved through intellectually believing the correct, precise thing is absurd. How in the world would anyone believe that? I don't know. But it comes from hundreds of years of institutionalized brainwashing in the system and the moneyed church, which is why Jesus forbid teachers and preaching for money, because he knew this is exactly what would happen. He knew that we would get these errors, such as Catholicism and essentially modern day Protestantism. Just a different error, that's all. Catholics are in error, but so are Protestants. All right, now, where was I? Okay, so now we have this Nicolaitan here. Now there is a city that God uses in his signs to symbolize the Nicolaitans. It is the home of the seminaries that churn out the Nicolaitan quote-unquote pastors. By the way, one more thing about pastors. The first warning that Jesus gave to the disciples when they asked for the signs to look for was he warned them about how there will be many Christs that will come and lead many people astray. Well, what is he referring to? Because obviously there haven't been many people claiming to be Lord Jesus Christ that have led many people astray. Anyone that has claimed to be Jesus Christ over the centuries, of course, has been recognized as being mentally unsound. So he couldn't have been referring to that. Okay, then there are others that think, well, this is all in the future. Well, that's also ridiculous, because why would that change? Why would suddenly people start to think that there's lots of Jesus Christs? I mean, I could maybe logically fathom one person claiming to be Jesus Christ and fooling some people, but no, that's probably not even going to happen. But not many, let alone many, right? Well, the word Christ is simply a Greek word for a Messiah, which is Hebrew for an anointed one. So Jesus was warning that there would be many claiming to be anointed ones that would lead many people astray, which is exactly what a pastor is. Someone who claims to be an anointed one. And today it is more dangerous than ever to be following a pastor. And to those, conservative Christians, and including Catholics, conservative Catholics, that either blame modern day pastors or the current pope or whatever as being the problem. No. First of all, the office of papacy is blasphemy. So the whole thing is the problem. But in Protestantism, no, that's not the problem. We can't and we shouldn't expect pastors to save the day by finally teaching the correct thing. The whole reason why they don't teach the right thing in the first place is because they preach for money. And it's always the case that when you preach for money, you're going to be thinking about your paycheck. It's just human nature. You're going to be worried about what you're saying, and you don't want to turn too many people off. In other words, no matter what size of congregation you have, you're always going to have this in the back of your mind. That's assuming you even had the correct doctrine in the first place, because if you're a Nicolaitan, a holder of the Nicolaitan doctrine, you don't. If you've been taught in Dallas, for example, you don't. But it's like McDonald's, right? There's a term for it. It's a business model. But McDonald's is successful because it churns out the most basic, minimal possible product that will appeal to the most number of people. That's that model of business, right? And that's a lot of churches today. It gets watered down. But that's like not to say that the pastor, if he were to speak what he really believes, would be any better anyway. But yes, that's what happens, right? And so anyway, Dallas. So this is very important here. So this I-35, so the shooting, I'm jumping ahead because it was recognized later, but the shooting occurred basically next to the I-35 highway in Minneapolis, okay? And the I-35 connects Minneapolis to Dallas from north to south. 35 hints at 5 times 7, and 57 is the equivalent of the word vaccine in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Like we had here, 88 in simple English gematria for Renee Good. And again, as I explained, vaccine is or rather ice is symbolic of vaccine, okay? So we have the shooting, which is shots, right? In the 32nd state, which hints at the G131, blood disease. And the I-35 also hints at vaccine, and therefore the shots. And so does ice. See, this is clear now, right? This is so clear. But I'm going to get into some astounding things here because I'm going to connect it to some other things now, including Dallas, because the I-35 connects to Dallas. And this isn't an accident. This is designed by God because, sure enough, exclamation mark, the ICE shooting on January 7th in Minneapolis next to the I-35 is exactly 266 weeks after the plane crashed, the small plane, private plane, onto the I-35 in Minneapolis. That's astounding because the Pope Francis, again, his age 88, connects with Rene Good here, is or was the 266th Pope. By the way, for those who are wondering how in the world Pope Francis could be the future Antichrist, it is because it is predicted, and rather it is the fact, and it'll be proven with this prediction for the 49ers, that Pope Francis, as in San Francisco, will be resurrected from the dead by demonic power in April of 2029. But that's another subject for another video. Okay, but that's why we have this 266 weeks connection. Now, the I-35 itself is symbolic of an artery. In other words, a blood artery, which is, of course, what the things are injected into. The ice, if you will. And the Antichrist is the overseer of the mark of the Antichrist, which is the shot, which is the ice. Okay? Which is the vaccine, as in ice. Okay? Now, that date of the plane crash was December 2nd, 2020. That hints at 122, because 122 is the 41st semi-prime number, which is the equivalent of the word key in Simple English Gematria. And keys are symbolic of the Vatican. The symbol for the Vatican is keys. The plane was piloted by a man who had represented America in international aviation competition, which gives us symbolism for America. This is a judgment sign, prophetic sign of judgment for America, but specifically the American Evangelical Church. And again, the I-35 in Minneapolis connects to the I-35 in Dallas. This is a blood artery, if you will, that's nonstop, goes from one city to the other. Now, January 7th, 2026 was 490% of a year, and that's symbolic of the most central prophecy in the Bible because of the 70 sets of 7 weeks, the 70th week being symbolic of the period of the Antichrist. Okay, so this is a prophetic number, and it involves the Antichrist. So this January 7th date was 490% of a year after the car pileup on the I-35 in Dallas, involving 133 cars. Now, 133 is the 44th semi-prime number, which hints at the 44th president, the second of the two antichrists. The car pileup in Dallas happened, I think it was the result of fog, if I recall. It happened early in the morning near a hospital, near the off-ramp to the hospital, that was at the time undergoing a shift change. And so the majority of people in the crash were hospital workers. This was on February 11th, 2021, when the VACCINE, was first rolled out. The clogged travel artery in Dallas was symbolic of clogged arteries from things, from shots. It happened on the I-35. 35 equals 5 times 7, which hints at vaccine. Which is 57 is equal to vaccine in simple English gematria. It happened in Dallas, the capital of evangelicalism, and the Nicolaitan doctrine. Now, one thing I forgot to write here, I'm just realizing, is that, by the way, speaking of shootings and the I-35 in Dallas, the 35th president was shot as his vehicle was going on to the on-ramp to the I-35. In other words, way back in 1963, this was a prophetic sign that pointed to the mark of the Antichrist, which will be enforced by a president. That president, the 44th president, was 9 presidents later, and he was inaugurated in 2009, as in ICE 9. The president was shot in the head because these marks of the Antichrists that people take ultimately put things inside of their brains which will act as transistors to the frequencies that will trigger, engender delta brain waves that will facilitate demonic possession of the people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. That's the symbolism in the 35th president being shot in the head as he was getting onto the on-ramp of the I-35 in Dallas. Again, Dallas, because the primary purpose of God's signs and the creation is the church. And through all of this, what's coming is God will be compelling the Nicolaitans to finally stop being Nicolaitan and actualize their faith and demonstrate their faith through their actions, through their response to the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, so the car pileup on the I-35 on the date February 11th, which is set 2 times 11 equals 22, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist in God's signs. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist would have been described in the book of Ezekiel, which was a Tav mark. Tav is the last and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And also the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes. And the chromosome comes in pairs. A chromosome comes in, there's 2 arms in a chromosome, but they come in pairs. So 2 and 2. And so the car pileup on the I-35, which again, the 35 hints at the 57, which hints at the vaccine. It's on the date that hints at the mark also. And it was the 9 plus 11th prime number of days after the plane crash on the I-35 in the 32nd state, which gives us the 32nd prime number in G131, which is blood disease. And again, the car pileup occurred next to the hospital with hospital workers, right when the thing was being rolled out. And the I-35 is a travel artery that symbolizes clogged arteries when a plane crashes on it or there's a car pileup, right? And so these, and also, as I just said, the mark of the Antichrist ultimately is leading to demonic possession, which is described in the 9th chapter of Revelation and is symbolized by Revelation 9:11, which is why the 9 plus 11th prime number of days between these 2 I-35 clogging, prophetic signs. Now, again, the plane crash was 266 weeks exactly to the ICE shooting next to the I-35. Again, ICE vaccine shootings symbolize shots, the mark. Now, January 7th, 2026, and the ICE shooting in the 32nd state, as in G131 blood disease, is 32 days before the predicted Super Bowl win by San Francisco in San Francisco. Okay? The ICE shooting in the 32nd state is 32 days before the predicted Super Bowl when it is predicted San Francisco will win in San Francisco. I should say San Francisco, and Pope Francis was the 266th Pope. So we have from the plane crash, 266 weeks, and then 32 days to the Pope Francis San Francisco Super Bowl. And 32 again is equal to Obama in simple English gematria. This 32 days is also 4 months and 4 days, which hints at the 44th President Obama, who will also enforce the mark of the Antichrist. The ICE shooting in the 32nd state is 32 days before the Super Bowl. San Francisco's predicted win in the Super Bowl in San Francisco will be 320.00% of a year before the 4th anniversary of Pope Francis's death. Which is also, by the way, the 2 + 2 year anniversary, which gives us 22, which symbolizes the mark. The car pileup on the I-35 in Dallas was 490%, as in Daniel chapter 9, of a year before the ICE shooting in Minneapolis in the 32nd state. The ICE shooting in the 32nd state is 1,170 days before the predicted demon pretending to be Mary. Now, 1,170 days hints at 117, which is the number that symbolizes Rome. It was the year in which ancient Rome reached its maximum expansion before contracting geographically. Okay, but 1,170 is also 390 plus 390 plus 390. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The number 390 is not only, the number of 390 days is not only a prophetic number of days in a very central prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, but it also hints at G390 in the Greek concordance, which is the word for return, which James used when he quoted Amos 9:11 regarding the return of the Lord to rebuild the temple. Okay, and so this Mary apparition, of course, is related to Catholicism, which is Rome. Okay, so the ICE shooting connects to the Mary apparition. Now, the Mary apparition will be 35 days before the predicted resurrection of Pope Francis by demonic power on April 26th, 2029. Again, 35, I-35, 5 times 7, 57, vaccine, simple English gematria. Okay, so we have the shooting, or rather the car pileup in Dallas on the I-35 connect to the, it connects to the plane crash on the I-35, which connects to the shooting next to the I-35 on January 7th this year, which then connects to the Francis Super Bowl, which then connects to the predicted apparition of Mary by demonic power. Well, all Mary apparitions in history have been demons pretending to be Mary to fool Catholics that barely know the Bible and worship Mary, because as 2 Thessalonians tells us, we get the deception we ask for. And so people who worship Mary are worshiping demons, and they will get what they ask for, which is a demonic apparition of Mary. By the way, Catholics are constantly having supernatural experiences, which are in truth demonic, for the purpose of confirming for them to trick them into continuing to believe their Catholicism, their pagan religion, their man-made religion on top of the Bible, which the popes do not have the authority to create. The ICE vaccine shooting, and yes, that's Catholicism. It's, some people are so ignorant, but Catholicism is centuries of successive pope doctrines. The whole worship of Mary thing didn't come overnight. Well, actually it kind of did, because when Rome converted to Catholicism, it didn't do away with its ancient pagan religion. It just repackaged it into a new form and a wrapper that looks like Christianity. So in other words, the worship of Mary is simply the worship of the fertility goddess repackaged. And all, ancient art of the worship of the fertility goddess is the exact same as the art of the Madonna, the Mary with the baby Jesus in her hands, in her arms. It's the same thing. The worship of Ishtar, Isis, Aphrodite, Venus. It's all the same as worshiping Mary, just repackaged. And the thing that God hates the most in the Bible, if you know the Bible, is the mixing of true religion with false pagan religion, which the Jews were ultimately exiled to Babylon for. Which is why Babylon is symbolism for pagan religion, which is why Peter, in his writings in the Bible, referred to Rome as Babylon. And no, Peter was never in Rome. Okay, and so ICE, the vaccine, in other words, because of ICE 9, shooting, as in Mark, in the 32nd state, as in blood disease, G131, next to the I-35, as in 57, as in vaccine, was at the intersection, as in X, as in Mark. God uses the X, which is the Tav, by the way, in ancient Hebrew, symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. Intersection of 34th Street, probably, and Portland Avenue. Portland because of the portal that will be unlocked with the key, as in the Vatican, to the bottomless pit in Revelation chapter 9, from which the demons will emerge into the earthly realm. 34 because it hints at 2 times 17, which hints at 9/11, the two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. And 9/11 is symbolic, or hints at Revelation 9/11. Because, for example, the door will be opened with the key in Revelation 9/11, right? To the bottomless pit, and the symbol for a door is the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Well, the 4th plane crash killed 44 people when it crashed into a 40-acre pit caused by the plane crashing at a 40-degree angle, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, the city of bridges, as in the bridge from the bottomless pit, demonic realm, into the earthly realm. And so that's what's hinted at with Portland here, and the 34th Street intersection. Obama's Secret Service nickname was Renegade. The day of the plane crash onto the I-35, as in vaccine, 57, in the 32nd state, as in G131 blood disease, was also the day of the prophetic Rockefeller COVID Christmas tree, a ceremonial lighting up of this tree on the that was from Highway 23 in New York City, ceremonially lit up in Rockefeller Center in New York City. Okay, let's unpack this. So Rockefeller is symbolic of the thing industry, the Rockefeller Institute is the pioneering of the thing industry. And that's the case in God's signs. I don't want to, get into any connections to confirm any of these sorts of things. The thing is, God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is an interconnected web. And when you try to explain any part of it, you end up pulling the entire web, because not only is it all interconnected, but to prove one thing, it requires second and third witnesses to prove that. And those things in themselves require second and third witnesses to prove those things, and so on and on into infinity. And it really is infinite. And anyway, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. All right, now, so what's with this? So there was this Rockefeller Christmas tree. It was a national news story because, well, two reasons. One, the media said when it had arrived that it was sickly looking. And it might just have been psychological, because when a Christmas tree is cut down and then folded up to transport it, the bottom branches aren't as full. It's when you let the branches fall again, it looks more full. But anyway, the internet was commenting, because of the period of the lockdown, that this tree perfectly symbolized the COVID year, because it was sickly looking, it was, scraggly looking. Anyway, also an owl was found in the tree. The first mention of the word owl in the Bible is Leviticus 11:17. In Zechariah 11:17, the Antichrist is described. And H11:17 in the Hebrew Concordance is the word Bama, capital B, Bama, which means high place. This tree was a very tall tree, as are Rockefeller trees, so it was a high place. And Obama was known to be a night owl. He is the Antichrist, and he was known to be a night owl. This was in stark contrast with his predecessor, who was known to be an early bird. And God designed it that way to highlight how the fact that Obama is the night owl, which gives us what I just talked about. Now, the reason why Obama is prophetic, it's not just that it rhymes with Obama, but the name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Jesus in Luke 10:18 said that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Barak means lightning. Bama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as for example, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place. And O, in the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, is the word for from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, I should say, either Jesus didn't know what he was saying, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And that is, of course, not even scratching the surface of all of the prophetic signs that identify Obama. In fact, 90% of God's prophetic signs identify Barack Obama as the Antichrist. It's the building block of the prophetic signs, and it is a shameful thing that evangelicals and those that also claim to be watching for prophetic signs don't know this. And the reason why they have missed the vast majority of the prophetic signs, one of the reasons, is that they fail to accept that God would reveal the identity of the Antichrist through prophetic signs, because of their heretical doctrine, which is expressed through their interpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Since this video is about Pope Francis, let's talk about that. So the heretical doctrine of the Nicolaitans has it that what's holding back the Antichrist in 2 Thessalonians is the Holy Spirit. But that's silly, no offense, but that's silly because Paul is talking about a he and a what. Why would he refer to the Holy Spirit as a he and a what? Furthermore, he was speaking cryptically, and he said that the Thessalonians knew what he was talking about. So if he was talking about the Holy Spirit, why didn't he just say the Holy Spirit? Why did he need to speak cryptically and also remind them that they knew what he was talking about? Well, the reason is because had anyone in possession of the letters would have been in danger had he spoken plainly, because he was speaking of ancient Rome. The he and the what is the capital of Rome moved by Constantinople, the he and the what. When he moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople, Constantine, which cleared the way for the rise in power of the bishops of Rome, who became popes. And furthermore, the prophecy also speaks of this Antichrist taking a seat, and Peter's chair is the symbol of Rome in the Vatican, right? Now, back to what I was saying, though. So we have this it's just amazing. We have to explain so much to explain so little. So, the Rockefeller Christmas tree. Okay, now, Rockefeller and his institute caused the pandemic in 1918, the Spanish flu, which wasn't a respiratory virus, contrary to the propaganda from the NIAID and a paper authored by none other than the wicked liar of liars, Anthony Fauci. Supposedly they got some virus isolated from a corpse in frozen Scandinavia and claimed that it was the Spanish thing, but it's a lie. And the truth is that it was a bacterial pathogen. And it was the result of the experiments that were done at Fort Riley in Kansas during World War I with the soldiers. Anyway, so we have this Christmas tree at the Rockefeller Center. We know the significance of Rockefeller and God's signs because of this. We had the owl in the tree, okay, because Obama is the night owl. And it was cut down next to Highway 23 and transported down Highway 23 to New York City. Obama wore number 23 in high school basketball, and the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, now the tree was ceremonially lit up in the Rockefeller Center, and this was the same day that the sky was lit up over New York State with a massive fireball. The video footage of the resultant flash of light across the sky was captured from the CN Tower across Lake Ontario and also near Niagara Falls. Now, the CN Tower in God's signs is symbolic of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel story is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, or rather, I should say, the attempt to reach heaven without God through technology in the story of the Tower of Babel, led by Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, is analogous to transhumanism technology that is the mark of the Antichrist, that is ultimately seeking to reverse aging and conquer death without God, as in reaching heaven without God with the Tower of Babel. The city of Toronto is literally a city of Babel made up of peoples from all over the world that speak all the different languages. It is the Tower of Babel city, and this is the Tower of Babel, the CN Tower. This is near Niagara Falls. This is symbolic of the flood. The Horseshoe Falls actually is pointing directly at the CN Tower. That's because God is communicating that the Great Lakes are going to overflow over the city of Toronto, which will be destroyed. Because it's the game of horseshoes. In a game of horseshoes, you throw the horseshoe at the metal stick in the ground, sticking upward. That's the CN Tower, and the horseshoes, if you look at it, it's uncanny. It really is pointing directly at the falls. But I'm saying this based not just on that. There's prophetic signs in God's big picture of signs that led to all of this and confirms all of what I'm talking about, or rather this prediction of what will happen in the future to Toronto. This day was 266 weeks, okay? This plane crash again. So let's rewind here. We've got the day of the plane crash we were talking about here, and it occurring on the day of the Christmas tree lighting up. That was extremely prophetic and symbolic of COVID. Oh, and yes, New York City was the center of COVID as well. It was the COVID Christmas tree because it looked so scraggly, as the internet was commenting and the news story reported. And then also, this was the same day that the fireball lit up the sky over New York State and over the Tower of Babel. And of course, the Tower of Babel, the tree, Rockefeller, it's all about the VACCINE, which is the mark of the Antichrist, the transhumanism technology, as in the technology to reach heaven without God, immortality without God, transhumanism technology. Now, this will all be promoted by the resurrected by demonic power Pope Francis, the 266th Pope, and this VACCINE Signs Day was exactly 266 weeks. And again, the artery was clogged, don't forget, with the plane crash. The 266 weeks exactly to the ice shooting in the 32nd state, which is 32 days before Pope Francis is before the Pope Francis Super Bowl. But what I mean by that is that the San Francisco 49ers will win the Super Bowl in San Francisco. Something that occurred to me just last night is that the name Francis is made up of 7 letters. And so San Francisco winning the Super Bowl in San Francisco gives us a 7 times 7, which is 49. The name of the San Francisco football team, the 49ers. Again, Obama is equal to 32 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. ICE is equal to 17, and the date that this ICE shooting occurred was on the date 1/7, which hints at 17. Minneapolis is located on the 44th parallel, which hints at the 44th president, whose name equals 32. This is in the 32nd state. Also, the only president to serve more than 2 terms was the 32nd president, but Barack Obama will likewise serve more than 2 terms. That's also why his name equals 32, or rather the president who served more than 2 terms was the 32nd president. Okay? 44th parallel, 32nd state. I realized that Matt Gaetz' last day in office, November 13th, 2024, is 1 year, 1 month, and 23 days, or 1 year and 53 days to Marjorie Taylor Greene's last day in office. And these 2 politicians, these 2 members of Congress for the Republican Party, are like brother and sister in a way ideologically. They were rebels, they were fierce, they were speaking the truth. God used these people for prophetic signs. It's not about the person, That's the deceiving thing. That's the whole point. Jesus warned to not judge by appearances. This is why Trump has the personality that he has, and I personally like his personality, but others don't. And Obama has this personality that everyone loves. It's because Jesus warned the exact thing. Those that will be deceived will love Obama and his personality. But those who love righteousness and truth will recognize that Obama constantly lies. Constantly bald-faced lies. Well, the left constantly lies anyway, but the lies that come out of that man's mouth. But it's astounding that the majority are so far deceived. They're so lost that they don't recognize it. In other words, they so love lies. They are so spirit of Antichrist that they love the Satan's representative, the Antichrist. And that's exactly how we would expect and how it is described in Bible prophecy. Okay, and so that's why he's the Antichrist, you know. Okay, now on this same day, this January 7th day of the ICE shooting, we have God's voice for truth regarding the VACCINE. That is the prophetic reason why RFK Jr. has an issue with his voice. It is symbolic of how he is God's voice for truth regarding the shots. Now, on this same day, RFK Jr. inverted the food pyramid. It was actually a national news story. I thought it was an obscure story. I was recognizing it was a sign until, in the beginning when I didn't even realize that even, it was linked to on Drudge Report, and it was a major story. Anyway, on this day, he inverted the food pyramid, and this is interesting given that this occurred on the day of the ICE shooting, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. And he is, again, God's truth regarding the mark of the Antichrist. It could be that this hints at food rationing that will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist, because that's what's coming. There's going to be a shortage of food, and only the so-called good citizens will be able to buy and sell the food that will be rationed, and this will be determined by whether or not one has taken the injection. Also, Satan's prerogative is to invert things and the truth. So that's why the food pyramid was inverted, because this is biblical. The inverting of something. That's what Satan does. He doesn't just make stuff up. When he lies, flips it upside down. That's just the pattern that he does. And so that's another indicator that this is a prophetic sign. But as well, the pyramid itself hints at ancient Egypt. And the king in Egypt in the Bible is a type for the Antichrist. But also, we have the pyramids in the Bible and the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. And the story of Joseph involved food rationing in the symbolic 7 years of famine, which is symbolic of the symbolic 7 years of the end times, which we are already inside. And for those that are looking for a supposed clear beginning date or something to that effect, you can stop that now. The prediction in this video, the purpose of it from God is to prove this. It's time to stop the Antichrist guessing game and to stop trying to figure out when the beginning of the final 2,520 days is. Okay, it's only symbolism and we are already inside it. It began with the beginning of 2025. But that's explained so many other times in other videos, I'll just leave it at that. Now I'm going to explain the relevance of this here in a second, by the way. I'm going to get back to the Gates and Marjorie Taylor Greene connection, okay? But I'll just add that for now, 1 year, 1 month, and 23 days is hinting at 1123, which is the 188th prime number, and H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word for woe ! Used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. And so MTG's last day and Matt Gaetz's last day hints at the last days, the end times. The number 153 is also from the Bible and symbolizes the end of the age of fishing for men. In other words, the last days. Okay, now also, RFK Jr. inverted the pyramid in Washington on January 7th, 1109 days before Obama is predicted to return to power in Washington on January 20th as Michelle Obama's vice president. Furthermore, Michelle Obama was known for, quote, replacing the food pyramid, unquote, as the first lady. So RFK Jr. inverts the food pyramid in Washington, this extremely prophetic number of days I'll explain in a second, to Michelle returning to power, and she was known for replacing the food pyramid. Again, food rationing, mark of the Antichrist. Okay. Now, 1109 days after JFK Jr. inverted the food pyramid, Michelle, who replaced the food pyramid, is predicted to become, as in her book titled Becoming, the president on January 20th, 2029. January 20th, 2029 hints at 1/10 plus 10 plus /9 plus 10 plus 10. Okay? In other words, it hints at 1109. But 1109 is a 9/11 number because on 9/11, 110 stories collapsed and engendered a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which is named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. And Joshua in the Bible died at the age of 110 after the walls of security collapsed. Also, Trump called into Channel 9 News, God's trumpet, on 9/11, after the 110 stories collapsed. He called into Channel 9 News, and Trump is God's trumpet, and the walls of security collapsed in Jericho in the Bible after trumpets were blown. And when he called into Channel 9 News, Trump inadvertently mentioned how his tower on Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Manhattan now that the 110-story Twin Towers had collapsed. Okay, this is why the serial number in the iconic image of the cargo plane taking off from Afghanistan on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 is big serial number on the side of the plane, 1109. The plane crashed, speaking of 9/11 and plane crashes, the plane crashed on the I-35 in Minneapolis exactly 266 weeks, as in the 266th Pope Antichrist, before the ICE shooting, as in Mark of the Antichrist, near the I-35, as in the vaccine, because of 57 equaling vaccine, in Minneapolis on January 7th. Okay, this in turn, January 7th is 3 years and 13 days, which also hints at Pope Francis, who was the 266th Pope, because he was elected on the day 313 in the year 13. But also this is relevant because Rome converted to Catholicism in the year 313 AD. So that's why 3 years and 13 days. And so in other words, again, from this crash that clogged the artery in the 32nd state, you got the idea. It's 266 weeks to the ICE shooting, as in Mark of the Antichrist shots, I-35 vaccine, okay? And that in turn is another Pope Francis symbolic connection, 3 years and 13 days before the Obamas are predicted to come to power in Washington, and Obama is predicted to become the second Antichrist through the power given to him by the first Antichrist, Pope Francis, as described in Bible prophecy. The plane crashed on the I-35 in Minneapolis, exactly 266 weeks. Oh, I just said that. Okay. So 1109 days is 3 years and 13 days. Okay? It's the same connection here. The last Gates day seems prophetic. His last day, November 13th, 2024, the last gates day, as in the gates to the city, as in the Bible, the gates is symbolically where judgment begins. That's why the name Gates. Okay? That's why also Bill Gates, for example. Okay, this last Gates day was 1 year and 53 days to MTG's Marjorie Taylor Greene's last day. Green is the fourth color, and she represents the fourth state, which hints at the 44th president, which is why when she speaks truth, it's a mirror, or rather a contrast with the 44th president speaking lies. Now, the last Gates day was also, or is also, 1,530 days to when Obama and Michelle are predicted to return to the White House and begin the last presidency and begin the last days, the end times. By the way, before I was a born-again Christian, in other words, contemplated the Antichrist, I knew on the day that Obama was elected in 2008 that he would be the last president. And this is very simple and straightforward. People get the leader they deserve. And with the election of Obama, it was clear that America no longer deserved democracy. And that's why we had Obama subvert democracy during his presidency and tried to stage a coup, and still is ongoing, of President Trump. Okay. And anyway, I just thought I'd add that. He is the last president. And I was really surprised and shocked when Trump became the president. But now I understand that God is using Trump to trumpet the last president and the Antichrist, which is why, incidentally, Trump's rise in power and his stay in the office has been a contrast, or he rose to power by calling out the truth about Obama's birth certificate. And the whole Trump era has been him calling out Obama, which is prophetically calling out Obama as the Antichrist. Okay? Now, the Antichrist was in power from 2009 until 17, the years, which is why this connection is also 9 times 170 days. Is there a reason why January 5th, the last Marjorie Taylor Greene Day, is 1,111 days before Obama's predicted return? Well, yes. 1111 equals 4. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4. Okay, so the Marjorie Taylor Greene Day, her last day, representing the fourth state, green being the fourth color of the rainbow, and by the way, also the fourth horse of the apocalypse, the green horse. Her last day is 1,111, which is 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 4 symbolism, which equals 4, to the 44th president's beginning last presidency and the beginning of the end times last days, if you will. Now, the name of the chief of police in Portland, who is a liar and spirit of Antichrist, calling out the lies or stating the lies in response to the shooting recently there by ICE. His last name is Day. Okay, as in last days, as in last Green Day, last Gates Day. Oh, Green and Gates are both the letter G. G is the 8th letter. GG hints at 88, as in 88. As in the equivalent in gematria of the word trump. In archaic English, the word trump is meaning a trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. So the last Gates and Green Days are trumpeting. They're a trump for the last days and the 44th president. Fourth color, fourth state. U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins said she wants to get Americans away from the highly processed packaged foods, saying those foods are driving the obesity epidemic in America following the release on Wednesday of new federal dietary guidelines. This whole flipping of the narrative. This is a whole flipping of the narrative. It's a flipping of what we've known over the last couple of decades. Well, the left and the things they believe and do is a flipping of what we have known to be true for decades. You know what I'm talking about. Everything they do is a flipping. It's an inverting. That's because they work for Satan. They don't know it, but that's what Satan does. He inverts. Paul, the apostle, even talked about how in the last days truth or good will be bad and bad will be good, etc. It's all a flipping. It's not just misinformation that the left constantly and lies, but it's just it's the opposite. It's always the opposite. Like when they accuse the Republicans or Trump of doing something, they're the ones that do the very thing. Every single time. It's stunning. Including the ICE example. Right? They're the ones that are promoting violence while speaking at the same time of not. They're the ones that are agitating when they call ICE agitators, for example. They're the ones that are divisive and stirring up the community when they accuse the ICE agents of doing such thing. And that's their primary motive. But it's their primary motive. It's not the ICE's primary motive to stir up things and for propaganda purposes to make Trump a man or something. I mean, these people are sick. But when I say these people, I mean the entire left. We've got a serious problem here, and that's why it's the end times. We've got more than half the country that has completely lost the plot. I mean, they're sick in the head. I mean, literally. I mean, I have compassion. They're sick. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And incidentally, the whole reason why ICE is there in the first place is because of their supporting of the wicked radical left apparatus that put the aging, demented old man in office while they deliberately opened the border and let tens of millions of people in order to create the very chaos that now they're criticizing. I mean, they intended this chaos because that's what the left does. Their strategy is always to stir up shit and create chaos and then bring in the radical solutions and permanently have those radical solutions be installed forever so that they can be in power. That's communism. That's the playbook of communism, right? That's why every single chance they get, they're out there protesting and trying to stir up shit, trying to amplify it, make it bigger than it really is, with paid protesters, in fact. That's the communist playbook. And the left of center people that eat it up, they're what Stalin called the useful idiots. But anyway, the goal was to not only create the chaos, but obviously also to change the political demographic forever so that it could be a permanently one-party state. Communism. The way to do that was to let in the masses from the third world. And now the Americans that don't want that are trying to do something about it, which was inevitable. And they knew it. And it knew that it would cause the chaos that we see now, but they amplify it. Not just the crazy woman putting her car in front, but the media's reaction to her inevitable, unsurprising death. The stupid woman that thought she could just drive her car right in the direction of the guy. Because she's entitled, because she's a woman. Because she doesn't think clearly. She's running on emotions. And she's been hyped up through propaganda and lies because she ultimately believes in a false religion. And so everything about her worldview is false because her politics flow downstream from her worldview. And her worldview is corrupted and it's satanic, and so she ends up doing satanic spirit of Antichrist things, like rebel against ICE, which is simply metaphor or symbolism for the left's spiritual rebellion against God. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy announced the federal... Okay, so we know that. Okay. So here's another story. The day after the ICE shooting on January 7th, which hinted at 17 Republicans, and by the way, the number 17 is symbolic of the Antichrist, because the metaphor for the Antichrist in the Bible is the beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. 17. Also, the Antichrist will be defeated on the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month. 17. Okay, so 17 Republicans voted in favor of extending Obamacare, which is Antichrist, because the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced through nationalized health care, which is why the Antichrist's signature law, Obamacare. It's exactly because the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced through nationalized health care. That's exactly why. And those that were against Obamacare were standing for righteousness, and those that were for it were for lies and deception, which is what Obamacare was. It was all lies and deception, as is leftist politics in general. Okay, so 17 Republicans voted in favor of extending Obamacare for 3 years. In 3 years, Obama will return to power and then enforce the mark of the Antichrist through nationalized health care. Okay, now, this is very interesting. Whether accurate or not, Marjorie Taylor Greene was portrayed in the media as betraying the Republican Party. She was called a traitor. On the same day as the last Green Day, the worst traitor in modern U.S. history died at the age of 84. Obama was born on the date 8/4, and the name Obama is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria. Green represented the fourth state. The fourth color of the rainbow is green, as is the fourth horse, the color green, in the book of the Apocalypse. The traitor, as in Marjorie Taylor, died. That just came to me, by the way. 1,111 days, as in 1 + 1 + 1 = 4, as in the fourth state, fourth color, before the predicted return of the 44th president on January 20th, 2029. The reason for this connection is that God is saying that Obama is a traitor to America. The wise people already know this. The unwise people don't already know this. Aldrich Ames, the traitor's name, was a traitor, an American, for the Soviet communists. Obama is a communist. That is a fact. And once a communist, well, he was a communist. He was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization. That's a fact. I've explained it so many other times in other videos. But I guess we should do it again here. Okay. So I'll just give you one proof. The May 19th Communist Organization, named after the birth dates of Malcolm X, as in Mark of the Antichrist X, and Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Communist Revolution in Vietnam, May 19th. They were an offshoot of the Weather Underground organization founded by Bill Ayers, who got Obama started in politics when they met each other while Obama was at Columbia in New York City. They both ended up back in Chicago because Bill Ayers is from Chicago, and Obama's communist father, his real father, Frank Marshall Davis, is from Chicago. Obama had a relationship with Frank Marshall Davis as an adolescent, I should say. And then he later moved back to Chicago to follow in his father's footsteps with communist activism, street activism, etc. in Chicago. Anyway, the May 19th Communist Organization was responsible for bombing the Capitol building in 1983. And that was $11,260 hours. Let's see. All right. Wow, am I ever glad that I checked that. And I mean, wow, am I ever glad that I went into this. Okay, so so Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization in 1983. And that was the year that they bombed the Capitol building. And that was on November 7th, 1983. 21,600 hours after the Barrack bombings, the Beirut Barrack bombings on October 23rd, 1983. So in other words, 21,600 hours is the equivalent of 15 days. Okay? 21,600 hints at the number 216. Take away the 2 zeros. 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. Obama was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. But also, the name Barack is equal to 216 in English gematria. And so from the Barrack, as in Barack, bombings, as in Barack Obama, we have the number that equals Barack, as in Barrack, as in the Barrack bombings. So the Barrack bombings, as in Barack, is 216, as in Barack, connection to the May 19th Communist Organization bombings, and that proves that Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization at the time. There's far more reason to know this than that. I said I would only give you one example. His name is also Obama. Okay? Now, so Obama was a communist and is a communist. Once a communist, always a communist, deep down, unless one has a life-changing experience with Christ. And communism is evil, not metaphorically, literally. That's the difference between the left and the right. The left sees communism as an alternative economic model. No, it is not, and neither did Karl Marx intend it to be. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he wrote about it. He foresaw the end of Christianity. He was an anti-Christian. He hated Christianity. He looked forward to the demise of Christianity through communism. This is in his writings. He was a playwright. He dedicated his plays to Satan. He wrote poems about Satan. He addressed a letter to his son titled "You Devil," which is how Satanists address each other. Okay, so yeah, the purpose of communism is to bring the shit down. That's what they do. They're agitators. They don't really want to bring in the utopia. They just want to tear stuff down. Let's be honest. That's their psychology. They're full of resentment. They're not really for the small guy. They hate, they're bitter, and they resent people that have more than them. That's the truth about their psychology. Okay? Furthermore, many communists come from wealthy backgrounds. It's not about, modern day communism isn't even about class anymore. It's just about resentment and spirit of Antichrist, long story short. So in other words, what I was getting at is that Ames was the worst traitor in modern American history, except for Obama, the most traitorous president in U.S. history. Now, the thing is here, The purpose of this prediction that is from God is to prove what I have just said. It's not up for debate. It's not an opinion. It's not conjecture. It's not speculation. It's fact. Obama is the most traitorous president in U.S. history. He got into politics as a communist. Along the way, he loved the power and loved the facade. But Bill Ayers and him got together at the beginning because the intention was to bring the shit down. And this will all come out in the moment of crisis during Obama's next presidency. His true colors, which is wicked and evil. So evil. Now, I said that I was glad that I looked into it because the day that Aldrich Ames died, this traitor, this biggest traitor in modern American history, on the 7th of the month, was exactly 42 years and 2 months after the Capitol building bombing by the May 19th Communists, the May 19th Communist Organization, which, by the way, was disbanded in 1985, which is why Obama moved to Chicago in 85. "42 years and 2 months exactly, because it was the 7th of November in 1983, hints at 422. And that is the 44th super semi-prime number. In other words, 422 is the 133rd semi-prime number. A semi-prime number is a number that is only divisible by two other prime numbers, and God uses this for signs and connections. And 133 is the 44th semi-prime number. And so 422 is the 44th super semi-prime number. And it connects to, this just proves everything. That Obama is the traitor of traitors, and because January 7th was the day that Aldrich died, and the May 19th Communist Organization, I just explained, is what Obama was a member of, the 44th president. And again, this day that he died is 1109 days to the day the 44th president returns. And I already explained the relevance of that connection. And so the bombing of the Capitol building connects to the return of Obama to the White House. Very straightforwardly and clearly, with two connections. The 42 years and 2 months, and then the 1109 days. Wow. All right, so here is what I just was talking about, typed out here. We have the date of the Barrack bombings, as in Barack, on October 23rd, 1983. And again, this is, there shouldn't be a comma, a bracket there. Okay. So 21,600 hours, 15 days to the Capitol building bombing. And again, that's relevant because 216 hints at Obama because he was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. And the name Barack is equal to 216 in English gematria. And that's why we have this connection from the Barrack, as in Barack, bombings to the Capitol building bombings by the May 19th Communist Organization, which Obama was a member of at the time. And that in turn is 42 years and 2 months, which hints at 422, which is the 44th super semi-prime number, to the death of Aldrich Ames, the traitor for the communists, which in turn is 1109 days to the date that the 44th president, as in the 44th super semi-prime number, returns to power on January 20th, 2029. And his name is Obama. All right, now again, Renee Good hints at renegade, which hints at traitor. Aldrich's wife, I should say Ames's wife, was sentenced to 63 months for aiding and abetting Ames. This hints at 3 sixes, 666, the number associated with the Antichrist. Ames's wife was his partner in crime. This hints at Barack Obama's wife and partner in crime, through whom he will return to power at the White House. She will be, supposedly anyway, elected the president and him the vice president. This will be how he overcomes the 22nd Amendment, which restricts someone from being elected president more than twice. Okay? And so he will be appointed the president after she steps down. He'll be eligible to run as the vice president. The Supreme Court will rule this is the case. Now, a renegade is Obama. We know that. Barack Obama's Secret Service code name was Renegade. In truth, Renee Good, as in renegade, was a traitor of the U.S. This woman that thought she had the right to harass and assault and impede the work of the federal law enforcement agents, ICE, was a traitor to the U.S. because what ICE is trying to do is nothing more than to get the illegals out of the country because they are illegal. That's the right of the U.S. to do so. Without a border, there is no country. And this, by the way, brings us to the philosophical underlying theme here of what's going on with the rise of Trump in God's signs. It is a border wall of security. Trump's presidency, his first campaign and first presidency, were synonymous with his border wall of security. And trumpets were blown before the walls of security collapsed in ancient Jericho. That's why his name is Trump. In archaic English, the word Trump means trump or a trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. That's also, by the way, for the reason for trumpets, because it hints at trumpets. And Trump Vance is a further play on that. Trump Vance also hints at trumpets because of trumpets. Okay, so why is this though? This is symbolism for how America, God's Gentile nation, was blessed. God propped up, God created America. God designed America as his nation of Christian disciples. The nation of America is one of only two nations that in history were founded on a relationship with God and the Bible: Israel and America. The Pilgrims saw their crossing of the Atlantic, which was the spiritual founding of America, as analogous to the Israelites crossing the Jordan River into their promised land. The Israelites were escaping the king of Egypt. The Pilgrims were escaping persecution from the king of England. And America was blessed with its divine protection from God. For one thing, it was separated from the rest of the world by two vast oceans. It had inherently in it this natural protection. But God has had his hand on America throughout its history. There's all kinds of, uncanny isn't even the correct adjective. There's all kinds of these truly mind-boggling coincidences that clearly demonstrate the hand of God on American history. I highly recommend watching, if you're interested, and you should be highly interested in what I'm saying here. Go and find the Eric Metaxas interview, or rather Socrates in the City episode with Michael Medved, where Michael Medved talks about his book about these coincidences in American history. You will be blown away. All right? So many examples of God's clear divine intervention in the history of America. Now, so back to what I'm saying here, borders are symbolic of this protection. A human being is made up of cells, and each cell has a border. Without these borders, there's chaos and there is no organism. You need to have borders for health. The nation is no longer healthy when the border has been removed. By the way, that's the reason why the injection is the mark of the Antichrist. It goes through the borders of the cells and infiltrates the cells, and then in the cell is designed to create the enemy within the cell, which is the protruding amino acid chain. And these stupid people that take it think that that's somehow a good thing. But it's the complete opposite. The immune system recognizes it as being foreign and attacks its own cells as a result. And that's a fact. And if you don't believe me, the prediction in this video will prove this. And if that's not good enough for you, take off. Take a hike, turn off the video. This isn't for you. You are wasting your time. So the reason for borders is because this is this natural thing that's needed in God's design. And the left has made it their objective to eliminate the border so that they can have the nation infiltrated by the enemy, symbolically anyway, metaphorically here, the people from the third world that do not have the same values and culture that Americans do, but will, as a result, because of that, vote Democrat. Because Democrats are anti-American. The modern Democrat is. And so is communism. Communism, socialism is anti-American. It's anti-American values. The true Americans today are conservatives. Case closed. There's no debate on that. The left is no longer American. And that's why they want to bring down America through eliminating the border. They installed their senile president, puppet, and then went ahead and did what they did, which was to remove the border so that they could forever change elections and have a one-party state, like socialists do. And the law enforcement agents that are trying to correct this are serving America and the purpose of America and the nation of America, which requires a border. Renee Good is a traitor of America. She is anti-American. She is not an American. She does not deserve to be in America. She is not an American citizen any longer. She is a traitor, no less of a traitor than Aldrich Ames. As I wrote, this is the righteous truth of the matter. All who support her, all people, all quote-unquote Americans who support her, including the lying, wicked politicians, are true liars and traitors. And as the Bible says, as the book of Revelation says, these liars will end up in the lake of fire. And that's all of them. All people who support her. Her name hints at renegade, the Secret Service code name for Obama, the traitorous president. So, in other words, she is a traitor. That's why this incident occurred on the day of the death of the worst traitor in modern American history. But her name is renegade, and God has used this to serve to reveal the traitorous president. In the 32nd state, and the name Obama equals 32 in simple English gematria. Can I be any more clear? I'll repeat that. All people who support her and what she did are traitors. They are ultimately also in spiritual rebellion against God. And this is a warning. I may sound angry, and rightly so. It is righteous anger, but I do have compassion. This is a warning. This is serving to attempt to help these people. They are far gone, they are far lost, but maybe there is hope. They've spent their lives choosing repeatedly over and over and over again the lie versus the truth, and they've gone so far that their minds probably are not able to be corrected. And they need to die and serve out their punishment in hell, and hopefully they'll have a second chance. Because contrary to what evangelicals say, the Bible does not say that people cannot or will not have a second chance. But they will go to hell, and they will suffer, and they will pay the price. And of that group that does go to hell, a large number of them will not have a second chance. Because there are three groups. There are those who will pass from life to life, and then there are those who will pass from life to death in hell, but then there are those who will die the second death. The others, the middlings, the middle group, no doubt the vast majority of human beings in history, will get a second chance. But do not count on that, especially if you are an American or in the West, where you've had more than an opportunity to understand the gospel. Those that will get a second chance are primarily those that were, for one thing, were born before the gospel, or did not have a full or proper opportunity to hear the gospel and accept Jesus. For example, in nations such as, you can pick any nation. There's many of them where they have barely heard the gospel, right? But that doesn't apply to someone like Renee Good. Renee Good is so far gone that, who am I to judge, or to speculate? But to speculate, I would say her spiritual condition could be that while she is in hell, she will be cursing God. And then die the second death, right? I mean, that's how much in spiritual rebellion she was to be doing what she was doing. That's how far the left is in America today. There's maybe no hope for many of them. Okay. Now, Renee Good, as in Renegade, the traitor, died 2 days after Ames, the traitor, died. The president named Renegade will serve a second presidency. Renee Good, as in Renegade, died on January 7th, 1109 days before the return of the renegade, Barack Obama. Okay? Traitorous Renee Good, renegade, was shot, as in mark of the Antichrist, by U.S. law enforcement on January 7th, 1+1 days after traitorous Ames died at 84, as in Obama, who was born on the date 8/4 and whose name equals 84 in Hebrew gematria, on the day that traitorous, quote-unquote, Marjorie Taylor Greene left office. Marjorie Taylor Greene, fourth color of the rainbow, fourth horse of the apocalypse, the green horse, represented the fourth state, which hinted the 44th president. And her last day and the death of Ames is 1,111, which hints at 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 4 days before the predicted return of the traitorous Obama renegade 44th president on January 20th, 2029. Renee Good, renegade, died on January 7th, 1109 days before the return of renegade. So we already said that, okay? Marjorie Taylor Greene represents Rome. Her district in Georgia includes the city Rome, Georgia, in the fourth state. Aldrich Ames was stationed in Rome, Italy. Ames died on MTG's last green day. Traitorous Renee Good, renegade, was shot, as in mark of the Antichrist, by ICE, as in vaccines. I already explained how that's related, right? Because of the ICE-9, Kurt Vonnegut, vaccine, ICE, it's an anagram as well. Next to the I-35 in Minneapolis, exactly 266, as in the 266th Pope in Rome, weeks after the plane crash on the I-35 in Minneapolis. Renee Good, as in renegade, was shot, as in mark of the Antichrist, 3 years and 13 days, as in Pope Francis elected on the date 313 in the year 13, and Rome converting to Catholicism in the year 313 AD. 3 years, 13 days, renegade was shot before the return of renegade, the 44th president, on January 20th, 2029. Traitorous Renee Good, as in renegade, was shot, as in mark of the Antichrist, by U.S. law enforcement on January 7th, 1+1 days after traitorous Ames, CIA, U.S. law enforcement, died at 84, as in Obama, on the day that traitorous MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, left office, quote-unquote traitorous, in Washington, D.C., as in CIA, as in ICE. MTG, fourth color of the rainbow, fourth colored horse of the apocalypse, fourth state, hints at the fourth president, and her last day on January 5th, 1,111, which hints at 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 4 days before the predicted return of the traitorous Obama renegade, Secret Service CIA, okay, Secret Service CIA, that's his name, on January 20th. So it's all Washington, it's all CIA, it's all, Ames spy, CIA, you get the idea. U.S. law enforcement, ICE, okay? Now, the shooting in Orem, which is an anagram for Rome, and Orem is the name Orem comes from ancient Norse, which means serpent, which is the dragon in the book of Revelation. Okay, so Charlie Kirk means church. That's what the name Kirk means. Kirk was shot in Orem on September 10th, on the date 9/10, 119, as in Revelation 9:11 days. That's relevant because it's the shots, as in the shooting of Kirk, that will persecute the church, the mark of the Antichrist. 100, and again, Revelation 9:11 symbolizes how the shots will induce demonic possession of people. So that's why Kirk, the church, shot in Orem, Rome, Antichrist in Rome, Pope Francis, 119 days, Revelation 9:11, to the date 17, which hints at 17, which is why 119 days is equivalent to 17 weeks exactly. Okay. Now, the shooting in Orem, as in Rome, serpent dragon, Antichrist in Rome, a shooting 117 days, as in Rome, which reached its maximum expansion in 117 AD, before January 5th, the last Green Day, who represented Rome in Georgia, the fourth state with four colors, fourth color of the apocalypse horse, Ames stationed in Rome, who died on that same day. This is 1109, which is at Revelation 9:11. So you see the pattern here. From the shooting of Charlie Kirk, we have the 119 days connection, and through this, the 1109 days connection, which hints at Revelation 9:11, which is also the equivalent of 3 years and 13 days, which also hints at Rome. Another part of this pattern here. We have these Rome connections from the shooting in Orem, which hints at Rome, because Pope Francis was elected on the date 313, as I said, but also Rome converted to Catholicism in the year 313 AD. And that again gets us to the Antichrist's arrival in the White House on January 20th, 2029. January 7th shooting as in mark of the Antichrist in the 32nd state as in the 32nd prime number G131 in the concordance, meaning blood disease. 32 days. 32nd state, 32 days. Obama, by the way. Obama means 32 in simple English gematria. Also, the president who served more than 2 terms, as will Obama, was the 32nd president, FDR. Okay, back to what I was saying. So this shooting, all right, in the 32nd state is 32 days before the San Francisco Pope Francis Super Bowl. San Francisco is predicted to win this Super Bowl that will be played in San Francisco. That's the prediction being made in this video that will prove everything in this video. And that's the purpose of this prediction from God. And believe me, I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. It is to prove the controversial things that I'm saying in this video. Okay? And it's to not appreciate that. It's to not appreciate the purpose of this prediction. I don't know how to say that any more than I've just said it. So what we have here is the 32nd state shooting 32 days before this Pope Francis Super Bowl, which is in turn 320.00% of a year before the 4th anniversary of Pope Francis's death. This is because Pope Francis will be resurrected from the dead 5 days after this, which, by the way, is 3 plus 2 days. Wow. Wait a second. That's a further, that's amazing, actually. And if we go back, actually, because again, the Orem shooting connects with 119 days to the ICE shooting. That's Revelation 9:11. That's Antichrist. That's Pope Francis. And that's the 32nd state. That gets us 32 days to the Super Bowl, which is then 320.00% of a year to the 4th anniversary of Pope Francis's death, which is 3 plus 2 days to the resurrection of Pope Francis. Amazing. And the 4th anniversary, because the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And in Revelation 9:11, it is the key that opens the door to the bottomless pit, which allows the demons to cross over into the earthly realm, which will use demonic power to raise Pope Francis. And the Vatican is symbolized by keys. The key opens the door. All right, now, so there's a section in the Wikipedia page for Aldrich Ames. And it talks about this incident that was used against him to convict him, where Ames was caught putting a chalk mark on the USPS mailbox in Washington, D.C., okay? And there's pictures of it. That mailbox is now in a museum. I forget where. So it's like an iconic thing about Aldrich Ames, if you will. Okay. Now, the day that he did that was October 13th, 1993. This is the date 1013, and this date is exactly 1013 weeks. 1013 weeks before the election of Pope Francis. We've already been talking about how all of this connects to Pope Francis. Okay, so, and furthermore, the numbers here hint at it as well, right? We've got a 10 and we've got some 1s and a 3. Well, this is also 233 months exactly, which is how I received the heads up to calculate this, because it was the 13th of the month here, so I thought to check the number of months connection. It's exactly 233 months. And so why is this relevant? Well, it's because 233 is the 13th Fibonacci number. And that, of course, hints at the book of Revelation, chapter 13, which describes the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist. Both Antichrists. The second one being in Washington, Barack Obama. And again, this incident was in Washington. Okay, now, so what's going on here, though? Well, the chalk mark on the mailbox is astounding, actually. It symbolizes a mark, as in the mark of the Antichrist, described in the book of Revelation, chapter 13. This is a stunning connection here. Well, 233 is also the 51st prime number, which is the 6 plus 6 plus 6 semi-prime number. The USPS box is symbolic of the image of the beast, or Internet Communication Network. So in this 13th chapter of Revelation, we have what's described as an image of the beast. But when we read it in the original Greek, John, who is the author, is saying that this beast speaks an unutterable language. It's an unspeakable language. The language is computer code that's unspeakable. And in this prophecy, which is all allegory, it's all metaphor, right? This beast that speaks, this statue of the beast that's communicating, that's uttering an unutterable language, is enforcing the mark of the Antichrist, which is exactly what the internet and the cell phones, smartphones, and communication, computer code information does. So, in other words, this mystery for centuries as to what the image of the beast could be referring to is now known. It's the internet. It's the smartphone, which will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. So that's what the mailbox, though, symbolizes, because this is communication. It's communication before digital communication, before email. It's a network, right? Each mailbox is like a node in a web that connects each other, that connects to everything, that connects all the information. In other words, before the information age, of the digital information age, there was the paper information age of the mail system. So, also, 1013 is the 170th prime number, which hints at Revelation 17, which speaks about Rome and the Antichrist, but also speaks of a prostitute riding the beast. Well, Ames betrayed the U.S. like a prostitute sells her body. (1013), the date, and the 1013 weeks connection from this 1013 date hints at the 11th son of the third patriarch in the book of Genesis, Joseph, who interpreted the king's dream involving 7 sickly cows and was symbolism for 7 years of famine. Well, the UN World Food Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program, and the International Fund for Agricultural Development are headquartered in Rome. I learned this when I was handing out flyers in Rome, warning people. And I was in a part of the ancient Rome where the Maximus was, And anyway, I looked across the valley and I could see this building and a massive blue flag, which was a UN flag. And so I was curious because, well, I thought the UN was in New York, but the UN does have these other, agencies headquartered in other cities. Well, all of the food ones are headquartered in Rome, and there's a reason for that. That's because the rationing of food during the coming food shortage will serve to enforce the mark of the Antichrist. People will be restricted from buying and selling food as it's described in the book of Revelation chapter 6, unless they have taken the mark of the Antichrist, and this buying and selling of food will be restricted through the image of the beast, the internet smartphone communication network. Okay, so also on this January 7th date, and God uses firsts in general for prophetic signs, the first ever emergency return of astronauts, 4 of them, as in the door, the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, symbolic of the door. So, as I wrote, this must be important. The plane crash on the I-35 in Minneapolis on December 2nd, 2020, was exactly 266 weeks before the ICE shooting next to the I-35 in Minneapolis on January 7th, which is 1,109 days, which is the equivalent of 3 years and 13 days before the return of the 44th president. January 7th is also 1,170, which since at 117 AD, the year of maximum expansion for Rome, days, which is also 390 plus 390 plus 390 days, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And we have a period of 390 days in a very important prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, but also G 390 is equal to return. Okay, we're talking about the return, the emergency return of astronauts here. Okay, so again, this plane crash, like I've been saying, said many times already, it was 266 weeks before the ICE shooting in Minneapolis, both on the I-35 in Minneapolis. And that in turn is 1,109 days, or 3 years and 13 days before the return of the 44th president. But January 7th, the day of the ICE shooting next to the I-35 in Minneapolis, is also 1,170 days, okay? And this gets us to the Mary apparition on March 22nd, 2029, the predicted demon that will pretend to be Mary, which will be recognized by the entire world. It will be a massive Mary apparition to deceive the world on the beach of Rio de Janeiro. All right, now the plane crash connects to January 27th and the day of the death of the goalie for the St. Louis Blues during the Flying Goal. This is huge. This should be a separate paragraph because this is huge. This is so amazing. Now, so this is beautiful because this prophetic sign that I'm talking about, the flying goal, has been recognized for a long time. And here we see it fit into the big picture of signs here. We have a plane crash, okay? What do planes do? They fly. Furthermore, the pilot of the plane participated in international competition representing America. It was a national warning of judgment prophetic sign. As we have discussed, it connects to the ICE shooting in Minneapolis, which was the day of the death of the goalie for the St. Louis Blues. Who was the goalie during the flying goal? Now this goalie, God uses records for signs. This goalie holds the record for most consecutive games played for a goalie. And he did it in the era where they didn't have masks. And his record is never going to be broken. And so anyway, this goalie, we're going to get into this here, that participated near the end of his career in this 1970 Stanley Cup flying goal. Okay? But he played for St. Louis, and the area code for St. Louis is 314. And this goalie's death, the flying goal goalie death, the flying goal's goalie's death is exactly 134 weeks, as in St. Louis's area code 314. It hints at that before the predicted plane crash of Kamala Harris and the 40th governor of the 31st state, Gavin Newsom. The 40th governor of the 31st state also hints at 314, and both of them will be in the same plane and crash in St. Louis, predicted to be on August 2nd, 2028. And their crash will be in the area code 314. That's why the 134 weeks to the death of the flying goalie. So let me just say this in a different way. Bobby Orr, the player who scored the goal. By the way, the goal is the most famous hockey goal in history. And the image of Bobby Orr flying through the air, captured by the photographer behind the goal net, is one of the most iconic sports images of history as well. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you've seen this photo. If you haven't, look it up. But Bobby Orr is tripped, and then he's like horizontal high in the air, flying in celebration with his stick up, with a big grin, because he just scored the winning goal that won the Stanley Cup. It was in overtime. Okay, it not only won the game, but it won the Stanley Cup. So he's in true euphoria, celebrating this goal. But then he's tripped, so he's flying through the air. I mean, even outside the Bruins Stadium today, there's a big statue of Bobby Orr flying through the air. So Bobby Orr was tripped, and Bobby Orr wears number 4. So Bobby Orr, jersey number 4, was tripped by St. Louis defenseman number 4, and then flew into the air when the flying goal was scored by him, Boston Bruins number 4, 40 seconds into the fourth period, overtime of Game 4, to win the series for Boston 4-0. That's a lot of fours. It was recognized a long time ago that this is obviously hinting at the 44th president. The flying goal hints at the rapture, God's faithful who will fly into the air, as it is said in prophecy in the Bible, to escape the Antichrist, the 44th president. Okay, so the goalie for St. Louis in the flying goal died on the day of the ice shooting, January 7th. And the ice shooting is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, like we've been discussing, right? 32nd state, G131, mark of the Antichrist, shootings symbolize the mark of the Antichrist, shots, and on, right? The artery, the I-35, the blood artery, etc. We've already gone through that. So we have the shooting symbolizing the mark, but then we have this connection to the flying goal, which symbolizes the rapture. So the goalie and escape from the mark of the Antichrist, the shots. The goalie for St. Louis in the flying goal died at the age of 94. 9 plus 4 equals 13. The flying goal, as I've just explained, hints at the number 4. Number 4 scored the goal, and then was tripped by number 4, but it was 40 seconds into the fourth period to win Game 4, 4-0. So the flying goal is definitely a hint at number 4, right? But the goalie died at 9 plus 4, or rather 94, which hints at 13, which is another hint at 314. And the goalie played for St. Louis, the area code for which is 314. Okay, because the goalie's death is, in other words, hinting at 13. The flying goal, St. Louis goalie's death, is exactly 134 weeks before the predicted flying plane crash in St. Louis in the area code 314. By the way, the crash will also be into a Major League Sports stadium, as was scored the flying goal. It'll be into Busch Stadium, incidentally. So you see, this is amazing because the goalie himself hints at this 314 number because he died at 94. And he's the flying goal goalie, which hints at 4. 94 hints at 13. That gives us 314. That's his death is exactly 134 weeks before the predicted flying plane crash in St. Louis in the area code 314. And once again, don't forget that this ice shooting on the day that the flying goalie died connected to the plane crash, the flying plane crash on the I-35 in the same city, as I explained before, with 266 weeks, which hints at Pope Francis, who is described as the Antichrist in the Revelation chapter 13, which is another reason why the flying goalie died at 94, because it hints at that too. Revelation chapter 13, which, by the way, also describes the mark of the Antichrist. It's amazing. The death of the flying goalie, which hints at 4, was the same day as the announced emergency return of 4 astronauts flying around Earth in space. And there you have it. That's proof that the flying goal is actually hinting at aviation here, because we are talking on the same day, the announcement of the flying goalie's death, the announcement of 4 astronauts. And of course, the flying goal hints at number 4. It's amazing. And again, also this hints at the 44th president, the Antichrist.